Hey kids, howdy and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It's the Ides of December. We're halfway through the last month of the year. We got Mercury finishing up his third act, a new moon to kick off the next lunar cycle, and the solstice is going to be occupied by some other interesting energy that we'll talk about at the very sort of last part of the astrology. But let's start with announcements and a question. Announcements are just, I've got my Astro Overview for 2026 taking place live on January 1st at, I think, 10 a.m. Pacific. So if you want to spend some time with me on New Year's Day, do that. If you want to just use the recording, do that. And it's not going to be short, kids. You might want to come live for a little bit and then go, okay, I'll get the rest of the recording if you want. The other thing I'm announcing is also and available now to buy your seats, even though we haven't deeply, started to market it, is my first class of the year is Jumpstart Your Spiritual Practice. It's the last Saturday of January that it starts, so you got some time for that. But since I've been screaming about the spiritual practice is necessary to get you through 2026, that's why I decided to do the class again live and offer it as my first one. Last announcement is I don't ever do a global healing meditation on the first Thursday of January because I'm guiding people towards the forecast, and we'll pick up with that the first Thursday of February. Dear Michael and Zoe, OMG, I am grateful to the two of you. The amount of learning and growing with the two of you, ! The amount of reflection followed by openings through my work following your advice. Oh my God, this is... Now you know why I'm reading this one. The goodness that each and every podcast and Red Robe daily videos bring. OMG, thank you in all caps. So it is in the spirit of further learning, growing, and reflecting that I write with two questions for which I hope I can get some guidance. I guess she wrote this before the Mercury retrograde started, and she was like, with the upcoming Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, what advice might you give for those of us whose natal chart has Mercury retrograding in that same sign, or, for that matter, Mercury's retrograding in one's own chart? In your own chart. And she says, thank you. I'll get to the second question because it's dream-related. But yeah, I've talked about Mercury retrograde in a natal chart before, but it's pretty simple. It just simply means two things. One is that there will be some element of communication and thought that will be some measure of inside, down below. I use the language of sensation because I don't want to say things like you're psychologically, problematic with your mind, because it's not true. Some people might have Mercury retrograde in their chart and they take longer to speak, but they are bilingual when they start speaking. The person with Mercury retrograde in the 9th house might feel like they're dumb, but it turns out they just learn differently. Mercury retrograde could be I can't find my own voice, right? So there is definitely that potential for inhibition, but you never know what the inhibition's going to be shaped like. So I would never say to a client, oh my God, Mercury retrograde in your birth chart means this. I do it as a prompting question. How does your communication set up challenges or difficulty? And then if I know the time of birth, I might add the house placement for context. But what Jung is talking about is a Mercury return. So every planet returns to its original position at birth. I can't in this moment think about the difference between Mercury's now I can't even think of the names, synaptic and symphoidoid. There's two ways to think. Sorry, kids. There's two ways to think of an orbit. One is the true orbit of the planet around the sun. And then there's the orbit that we see of Mercury starting there and returning there later. Because of retrogrades, the timing is longer. So if 88-day regular orbit, the orbit we see is 120 days or something like that. My little dad joke about a Mercury return is you're being restored to the factory installed settings of how you think and communicate. But you've been through 120 days of learnings and lessons and retrogrades. You're different in your mind with each return. So the idea would be that every time this goes round your whole life, it is true. It's returning you to your sense of like, oh, this is what I know about communication, but hopefully greater, better, more expanded because of age and wisdom. When it's a Mercury retrograde, it's like a triple opportunity. And for my money, it has to be conjunct your Mercury, not just in the sign. Like if anybody's Mercury in Sag is above 6 degrees, I'm not talking about you. I'm only interested when it's exact. And when it is, a Mercury retrograde in your own sign is just like all of the other ones that I described of the return, but deeper, 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 because it's a 3-pass process of knitting together new ability to be in one's voice and thought. And then the retrograde sort of stamps it into place. Secondly, I'm wondering whether you can shed some light on the difference and similarities between dreams and going on wild journeys while meditating. The two often seem very similar to me in that I usually don't have any say, yes, right, in where my meditations take me. It's as if I do dream while sitting on the cushion. Except I can recall my meditative journeys a whole lot easier than my dreams. And OMG, I would love some help, blah, 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 blah. And she says some more lovely, effusive things about my work, but that's the nugget of the question. So we'll start by saying they both come from the same place, right? The unconscious is the source of everything that isn't there and then is there, right? Meaning, even things we say that we think, oh, I planned this, are also being driven by unconscious impulses that might cause you to do the thing you think you shouldn't do. I mean, think about sending that text. You're holding your phone. You're like, there is no fucking way I should send this text. I know better. I'm consciously aware of it. And boom, send. Because the unconscious has more power to everything. Now, to give a separate way of looking at this that's a little more delightful, the same is true of all of our creative impulses. And I'm not talking just about people who are talented with creativity. I'm talking about everything that is like, again, something that wasn't there that is there. Like if you are folding your napkins for a dinner party into swans, that's creativity. And then the idea to do it and the placement of how you arrange the table comes from the unconscious. My favorite thing, not my favorite, my most hated thing is when I say something about an unconscious impulse that I'm reading, and they're like, I don't do that. I'm not that. I'm like, unconscious is really unconscious, right? Remember I said that? So meditation imagery, especially when you get sort of facile enough with the skill of quieting the mind, also taps into that place in the unconscious and maybe a little bit of that DMT that's sitting in our pineal gland, so that then the meditative stories are as visual and vibrant as dreams, maybe even more so because part of you is sitting on the cushion. And they're telling stories from your unconscious, right? So the intention of what the sit is sort of is everything. So it might be you meditating on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:00, or it might be what happens when you go share kirtan with community. My experience is that if you just sit randomly to connect, that's what you'll have. But if you sit to answer a question or meet the intention of a community gathering, then where you go is going to be your unconscious saying, hey, here's what you need to know, and I'm telling it in the form of a story. Dreams come from a much deeper place because the synchronicity of the brain waves is such that we pass through the theta and delta waves into like a room down at the bottom of our psyche where dreams start. And meditation only goes so far as creating like delta waves, maybe theta waves if you're like really advanced. So you can't get into the room where dreams are. So it's less vibrant, less connected, less direct, but just as revelatory as dreams are. And you follow the story to get the message. We are finally completely out of the Mercury woods as of tomorrow.
Woo!
Yeah. Last week was really all the juicy juice, right? Where he was wrapping up the triple transit cycles, and like every day or every other day, we were sort of being dragged back into the past to wrap up, some current conflicts. And then we sail into this week with Mercury getting to like 5 and now 6 degrees of Sagittarius on Tuesday, which is where he was when he started. So I'm not going to go over every little permutation and twist and turn of this. We've already been through it, and hopefully you've been following and gotten out of it what was available for you. But the overall theme was about feeling like you are inhabiting an idea of what is true. Truth is, not a real thing. There are all kinds of truths, but Sagittarius is sort of how we know that. And when Mercury moved here a while back, he said, no, I don't know enough about death. I don't know enough about change and transformation, because we're going into something even more challenging in the area of change and transformation next year. And we need to have our truths, air quotes, backed up by more experience of transformation. That, to me, would be the theme. Mercury will carry that message through his free and clear 2-month process. And you can sort of rest assured that the mind's not going to take you on any backwards, twisty journeys for the next 2 months. We also wrap up what was a really intense lunar cycle, sort of appropriately kicked off by Pluto's rulership in the Scorpio new moon at 28 degrees of Scorpio. And we felt every inch of that death, rebirth, change, and transformation. Now, we're in that part of the year where the new moon that kicks off a cycle has the sun changing signs before the next new moon. So, of course, we did that last month by having the new moon in the sort of realm of change and transformation, saying, here's what we're starting up this lunar cycle. We're all going to die to self a little bit to be reborn in order to accomplish what we need to, both in our lives and with the communities where we dwell. Just a couple of days after, the whole lunar cycle then shifted our conscious awareness in the direction of Jupiter's rulership. Where do we find joy? How do our sort of explorations and desires to learn more and explore more light us up and have a sense of expansion that we get? When we learn, when we travel, when we open up our minds to curiosity. So what's lovely about that is that a lunar cycle that was killing us to be reborn had us focusing on and aware of what Jupiter's message is to us, which is you can have a life of abundance multiplied abundantly as you live inside your joyful. The blah sound is like, is that like follow your bliss and everything will come? It's like, no, follow your bliss and you'll have more bliss. That may bring cash and prizes or it may not. Bliss might be worth the journey, so hopefully the Scorpio death and rebirth might have tempered some people's, sort of wishes for things that aren't coming out of the pace of their heartbeat. Because I think that's a truth that Sagittarius also knows. So the reason why I'm talking about what happened last lunar cycle is because I want to call your attention into those sort of awareness changes, because we have the same exact setup in December, only one sign over. In fact, it's kind of funny, because there are only 30 days in November, both new moons happened on the 19th of the month. So 19th of November, 19th of December, both new moons. Because of also the way the months line up, that one was at 28 Scorpio, this one's at 28 Sagittarius. These are more synchronicities than astrological phenomena, but synchronicities count. They are the way we know that we're in a kind of multidimensional experience where there's energy that has our back that we can never know, see, or touch, but it's there. Sagittarius also knows that as a truth. As almost everything has this, I don't know if it's been this way all year, but certainly in the last 6 months, I've noticed that so many of the lunations and significant astro moments have very definitive binaries. Like, each one has contained something very yummy and positive and very confronting and difficult, and this is no different. So I'll start with the yummy and positive. One is that Venus is in Sagittarius and she is conjunct the sun and the moon. Love that for us because that means that we are entering the new cycle with our hearts more excited than perhaps they have been. And that speaks to Venus moving through Scorpio, letting that intensity shift and change her. And now in the fires of Sag, she's lined right up with our intention setting, Jupiter ruled, what do I want next energy coming on Friday. All of those Sagittarius players are trining Chiron. It's a loose trine. It's not the exactness I love, but, Venus is at 24 degrees and Chiron's at 22. So that's a 2-degree orb. That's a pretty tight trine. And what it means is that we are setting intentions from a much more healed place and with a greater sense of how to work with the mystery. Chiron teaches us that the lunar cycles have impact and that when we dance with them, we are like lining up our own breath with the breath of the solar system. So a new moon that has Venus and love in tow in a trine with the wisdom of the mystery, that puts Chiron much more in the realm of the Yoda guidance than the psychic surgeon's painful healing. On the side, the grand water trine that's been in place all of the last few months is still active in this lunar cycle by virtue of this new moon, because Black Moon Lilith is still in Scorpio. In fact, she is at the mastery, anoretic, final degree of Scorpio when this new moon hits, which is, like an explosion of Scorpionian shadow work. Just a couple of days before then, she changes signs and will spend 9 months in, you guessed it, Sagittarius, where we know a higher truth. So Black Moon Lilith has been here for 9 months, and certainly in the last 3, she's been in the last decan of Scorpio, activating the Grand Trine directly. In this new moon, that direct trine is still being held with Neptune. What that means is that our willingness to go into really scary places in our psyche, that there's such great benefit in healing, because Neptune is saying, I will give you the world of guidance, inspiration, and intuition if you open up and make space for that. And that's what Black Moon Lilith does. She tells us, this is where you're ashamed. Work on that. So that trine is in place with not only Neptune and Pisces, but also Saturn and Jupiter. They're still close enough to trining each other that Black Moon Lilith and Neptune are also traveling with Saturn, bringing us the structure and the lessons and the responsibility needed to grow a new consciousness. And our friend Jupiter, expansion in Cancer, exalted there. I don't know that there's any better expression of the yod than when a new moon is the pointy end. because the pointy end is the sort of direction mechanism. A yod is a navigating term. So it very literally connects to, or the origin of the word literally connects to the idea that you have to vector a little bit to catch the wind, right? So you have to make adjustments to your sort of instrument, and just like a sailboat has to do that, we get to do that when a yod is present. And when the sun and the moon are the apex, then it is really about setting intentions that have the power of the divine to sort of blow wind into your sails, just like cuz. Adding Venus close enough in Sag puts our heart centers and love and what we've learned about keeping ourselves open at the level of emotional body into the intention setting mojo and therefore the apex of the yod. And even Mars, he's only like 5 degrees away in Capricorn. That's close enough to be conjunct this stellium, especially when it comes to me describing a moment where the intentions you dig into with this new moon have the capacity to be part of what guides you through the year ahead. I would even encourage any of you who ritualize the new moons in a way that might be expanding to prayers and thoughts for the world herself. Jupiter is, and therefore Sagittarius, is the consciousness of the world connected, right? Jupiter's a social planet, therefore he relates to the world. And because he's the planet of expansion, then we set intentions that allow us to be like a resident of the earth from a much higher place. And then the blunt end, the motor of the yod is Jupiter, expansion, Cancer, internally kept and held, but expansion nonetheless. And the exact geometry is with Uranus at 28 Taurus, which means as we dig into that intention setting power of the yod, one of the sort of energies that's blowing wind into our sails is the most vibrant energy of fast movement that we have here. So I want you to remember everything that I just said when I talk about what I'm about to express. Now for the squares. And not only are there a lot of them, every single one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares that are present in this new moon are the personal planets. So there's an interesting story right there before I even go any further, that the setup that I just talked about is fabulous. Right? The setup is we go within, we find our, manifestation water, we learn about being a good student, blah, 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 blah. I just said it all. So, right? Big, yummy picture. But the personal experience is going to be very much of a squeeze. Even just ending the year and knowing that we're heading into a new year at a time when the whole world is on fire with war might even be some of the squeezing personal difficult feelings that show up at the end of this week. But I want to reiterate again before I start breaking it down that the challenges of this week into next and the lunar cycle ahead are at the personal level, which means none of them are real. Right? They're all the illusion of the three-dimensional consciousness that we are in and must work with. But integrated consciousness tells us to trust our internal connection to the big one and less, reliance or a dependence on the little eyes. Mercury is in Sag as well as the other folk, but early. He's only at 10 degrees of Sagittarius on Friday, and the nodes of the moon are at 11. South node at 11 Virgo, North node at 11 Pisces. Remember that overview for the last, year has been sort of like moving away from the limits of structure and the way things ought to be and being perfect and saying, no, 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 I can't until I'm ready. Where how we want to move forward is through the consciousness of trusting the invisible, moving with faith. What's that phrase? Faith in things unseen. And we still have another like 6 months of that setup. But this particular new moon has Mercury, the planet with which we set intentions and perceive everything, in a higher place because of his retrograde, T-squaring the nodes. That means that we're going to be very captivated about the past we're moving away from and the future we're creating. I like this for the archetypal setup of setting intentions that move us away from the past and into new territory based on inhabiting higher truths. But just like you can imagine that idea out in the world right now is not going to bring trines, it's going to bring squares, because when you speak your truth too loud out in the world right now, someone might shoot you. So the reality of what I just said might be very well expressed and reflected in this Mercury square. And then Venus, the moon, the sun, and Mars are in this tight stellium in mostly Sag, Mars in Capricorn, and they are in a square with Saturn and Neptune. Sun and moon, the square is like applying and kind of exact. Venus and Mars, so heart and body are involved, but not like they're going through a meat grinder making a sausage of mind and heart. All of these personal planets squaring Neptune reminds me very much of Neptune's capacity to reveal and dissolve. Right? The essence of a square is conflict. And when Neptune's involved, I'm always going to say something like the clouds, the fog, keeps us from being able to see. But I would use that language when there would be a Neptune transit on a day. In a new moon, we have to treat it a little differently. Even though all of those personal planets are squaring Neptune, that will dissolve illusion, denial, wishing things were nicer and better than they really are, perhaps through confrontation of how things really are. But we need that too, right? We can't see the world through rose-colored glasses. And I think this square to Neptune can help dissolve some of our wishes to like sit this one out. And why I use that language is because of the square to Saturn. Like that's we don't get to sit this one out. The teacher is literally with a megaphone standing on the rock going.
Just in your face.
That's right. Do it. Do it. Do it. It's like football coach Saturn trining. I think especially because the Venus-Saturn square is exact and applying. Applying meaning it hasn't perfected until maybe like later, Friday night or Saturday morning. But that makes it very exact, which means there's going to be feelings that come up through frustration or things that are delayed or broken down or that wah you don't get to have when you want it. I think the theme of cognitive dissonance is a great one to just describe this new moon and all of next year, right? We don't get to sit out of the difficulties that we are presented with. We find our way to hook in. You can be of service to the planet just by, holding it in prayer by yourself in your house. As long as the intention is there and the energy is focused outward, you're doing your part. Cognitive dissonance demands that we hold two things that are rubbing up against each other uncomfortably. We don't get to end that discomfort by leaning in one direction or the other. We have to be able to say, the world, maybe even my country, if you're a citizen of the United States, is changing in a way that is overwhelming, seems kind of horrible perhaps, and no one can know where we're going. And oh my God, that's an awful feeling. But at the same time, you still have to honor the love of being here in a body, exploring, experiencing love and sensuality and community and touch and creativity and making beautiful things where there used to be nothing. That is still who we are. And never has there been more of a need and a demand to inhabit your full self. When the world is squeezing you, don't let it make you small. Push through the dissonance and use the friction of that dissonance to make yourself sort of bigger and greater, and therefore a participant in the world's narrative that's healing. Winter solstice is Sunday. In fact, the sun will move into Capricorn exactly at like 7:03 a.m. Pacific time. And so what I love about that is, to me, that makes like Sunday the solstice day. Often I won't honor it until I've woken up like into a day where the sun has changed signs, but early enough to be like, that's our solstice day. Solstices and equinoxes are not transits. They are marker moments. There's no geometry involved because we're one end of the geometry, right? The geometry is the earth and the sun. So if we are the earth in this equation, there's no third place where we watch it from. You know what I mean? Like, astrology is us on the earth watching two other moving bodies. And that's what we call a transit, the friction of us relating to those two moving bodies or more is what a transit is, and that's something we feel and work with. But when it's just the earth and the sun, we're the earth, so there is no viewing third to watch. But they're important to mark if astrology is how you're choosing to contextualize your life, because the code of our seasonality is written in the sun and the earth's relationship. So this is the shortest day, darkest day in the north, longest, most light in the south. Harmony and balance comes only when we can expand our thinking to be so universal that even though we're living in the dark up here, we can think of the light down there and feel an integration. And same thing for my friends down under, where you're in summer, think of the inner dark and you have the experience of wholeness and balance. That said, there's some interesting stuff going on around the sun that was very, very interesting to me. One is that the moon's in Capricorn. So we're fresh off the new moon in Sagittarius that's hitting on Friday. And so 2 days later now is that moment I've been talking about where the conscious awareness changes chapters and sort of gets into the realm of goals, ambitions, what we want to build. That said, there's something powerful about having a new moon in Sag, and then 2 days later, having that consciousness shift I've been talking about, where the Capricorn sun, besides marking that it's the winter solstice, is also telling us that we're now going to focus on what we want to build in the lunar cycle to come. And the fact that we had that new moon, and then right after it, the moon would have moved into Capricorn, preceding the sun, and Mars is already there. So this puts a kind of consciousness of really, what are we going to build as the sun rises up from this place of darkness and death? Because the beauty of this moment is it's also a resurrection. The solstice is the moment when we go into the tomb for 3 days. So I want you to remember this idea if you honor the solstice. Think more about the rebirth that begins 3 days after the solstice as we look out into our horizon and we would see the light beginning to return. Trust that light. It's who you are. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Today we have a call-in dreamer from Appalachia. Mallory, what you dreaming?
Hey, how's it
Love
going?
that. Good. Welcome.
All right, let's just get down to it. So I had a dream on Sunday, November 30th, where it just kind of popped me up right out of bed from this dream. It just like the dream happened and it just woke me up into consciousness. I've been having the same reoccurring dream all that week. I haven't had it since I popped up out of that consciousness, though. So that was
So
interesting.
are you saying that in earlier iterations it didn't pop you up, but this last one was like the exclamation point?
No, actually, when I did have the reoccurring dream, it was still popping me up into consciousness each time I would have it. So, like, I would have probably had it before I emailed you on that Sunday. So probably twice that week prior to.
Okay, great. And what was the images?
All right, so I was dreaming that I'm in a public space at random where it startles me to the point of waking up. For example, I will be standing in line at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, and my ex turns around and I'm shocked. And for just a little bit of context, I have an 8th house Pisces moon, 20 plus degree Leo stellium with 7th house Saturn. I dated Gemini, that's my Juno.
Oh,
For about
honey.
9 months in 2022, where he broke up with me on my 30th birthday. We proceeded
Oh, fuck. Happy birthday.
right? We proceeded to have a miserable situationship for the next 3 years. It was absolutely toxic. This past July of 25, I finally cut this person off for good. It was amicable on both parties. Both parties wanted it to end. I haven't really thought about it since then. I've moved on, doing, the healing, and rediscovering the beauty of life, taking on new hobbies. For example, I just learned how to play the violin last week. I'm taking classes for that. So yes,
Golly.
but so back to the dream.
Yeah.
I'd be in a public space. So the first one I had was I was a coffee shop. I was waiting in line and I was looking around, and then the person in front of me looks around and it's my ex. It startles me before I can even say anything or do anything and just wakes me up into consciousness. And
Got it.
I was like, whoa, all right. Let's move on for my day. And because I was like, I didn't really want to deal with that right now. So then I kept having the dream over and over again. And to the point of the one on Sunday, I was at the grocery store. I was getting items and I was going to check out. And the person that was checking out, he was the cashier. And then I went to turn around and look because I'm spazzed out. I turned and the person behind me is now his current girlfriend standing in the line there. They don't really say anything, but the energy is felt. The energy is like, they don't want me here. I don't want to see them. I don't want to, be there, to see them or anything. I'm just existing and running about my life. But what's weird is that over the loudspeaker, in the grocery store, it's saying let go already, let go.
Oh, man.
So I don't know if it's my spirit guides telling me let go of the situation, place, or thing. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I work in finance. I don't worry about running into him in waking life, nor do I wish to, have him re-enter my life in any way. I've moved past that in my waking life. But I guess my question is there something that I'm not letting go of subconsciously? I don't know. What does this mean, doctor?
Well, let's break it down. I mean, what's hysterical about the literality of that dream is if we were collaborating on a screenplay and you said, "Hey, how about this?" I'd be like, that's a little nail on the head, don't you think?
Absolutely.
A couple of things that are very interesting to me is that everywhere you are is a source of nurturance and sustenance. right?
Interesting. Okay, go on.
Right. There's a grocery store and coffee shops. Both of those places offer us nurturance and sustenance. Coffee shop a little different, a little more about public and interaction and social life, and however you would want to interpret the sustenance of like sweets and caffeine. But there's something lovely about a coffee shop as, I don't know, kind of like yummy's a little too strong of a word, but like soft, lovely aspects of public life.
Absolutely.
Right, you're not in the middle of an intersection, with flying traffic and scared for your life. Coffee shop is like a social consciousness of ease with gathering, and grocery stores where we get everything we might need for sustenance. Okay, so
Yeah.
I want to sort of pull way, way, way back though with you and talk about first consciousness itself is a mirror. This is a law. It's not a pretty trope. It's not like a woo-woo thing we say to feel better. The quantum physics is telling this now, that the three-dimensional world is a place where we are each perceiving the world that we're in, which is one world divided into 7 or 8 billion fractals, or lenses, and that is a law, and that transcends personality, your family, right? So I want to start with that so that we're not thinking that this mirror consciousness that I talk about all the time, that we're all talking about all the time in the world of, self-investigation and spiritual consciousness, it really is that. So let's then sort of go one step further into the human body. A person's in their body and internally in their three-dimensional consciousness, but in the unconscious, there's a thing inside of them, like an archetype of the beloved. In fact, there's a whole branch of couples therapy called imago therapy. And imago, I think, is Latin for image, and it's a kind of it's not Jungian per se, but it's the idea that two people who find each other and form a relationship, it's because, and this is the sort of psychological viewpoint, the imago matches. So you, Mallory, have an internal idea of the beloved that is, it's a pure archetype. It's not like, oh, well, my type is tall and blonde, right? It's an archetype of this is what I'm drawing to me. Now, two people can have matching imagos and get into a toxic relationship because the idea is your consciousness is drawing into you through the mirror that which you need to have a more elevated idea of who you are through self-investigation by clearing out some, shadow. So back to the sort of 5D big picture. Here's what's going to blow your mind. Or maybe, I don't know. Every partner you have is the same.
I don't like that. I've seen that.
Nobody likes that when they first see it, because you're going to see it through the punitive lens of it's hard, as opposed to the embodied lens where we welcome anything that allows us to expand into a greater level of our consciousness.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, they were all Gemini Venuses, so
That doesn't make me feel better, but it certainly illuminates something about the pattern you might be working out. Where your attraction to the good words, Venus and Gemini, sort of circumnavigates the shadowy nature of you based on your, chart. So back in the 3D world, relationship changes feel epic. They are one of life's big ones. And so the imago changes when we grow in terms of what we want and desire, what we used to put up with that we no longer will. We learn and grow with each, and then that imago changes shape. And if you're doing it right, every relationship can and should be an upgrade.
I think I'm following. I think that what you said, all partners are kind of the same, Gemini Venus thing. And I feel like they are the same, but they're like a growth version as I continue to grow and I see
That's
myself
right,
through
because
those
two
people.
two things are happening, and that's
hmm
what my work and astrology demands, that you open your eyes wide enough to see both things that are happening. You can't live in the imago space of every partner is the same. Imagine saying that to your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or
Ooh.
husband. It's nonsense language. You use that language when you're in your shadow work, but it's still true that every person is a reflection of your imago as it shifts through life. And sometimes you get grabbed by the need to do some deeper shadow work, as you are with this man, this toxicity, and this current set of dreams. Another thing that might be surprising, but like, oh yeah, that must be true, is we're dreaming constantly of our partners. But when we're in the relationship, we don't think of it as remarkable. We might even say, oh yeah, my boyfriend was there with me. We might not even mention it because they're part of our life, so we don't think of dreaming of your partner as significant. It's just part of the. But when you break up, you remember every fucking dream of the ex as significant and remarkable, because part of your conscious awareness says, we're done. You don't belong here. But the message of the dream is exactly what you said. You need to sort of wake up, right? You're being woken up. You need to wake up that there is indeed something that you missed. That is about letting it go, whatever, and now I'm doing air quotes, it is. So the last thing that I'm going to say to you is that you don't need to know what it is. If you are on the path of consciousness unfolding, you're not going to miss the significant detail of this unfolding. You're being carried through it in order to have the changes and transformations become part of your embodiment. That might be why at a certain point the dream came, and then stopped, because the dreams may have been doing the very work that letting go is telling you to do. So I don't want you to wake up from that dream and think, oh my God, I'm failing. There's something I'm supposed to do and I don't know what it is. Oh, fuck.
My Virgo Venus saying that to me on a daily basis.
Right, and that would belie the law of reflection that we're talking about, because that implies that you have some ability to control the multidimensional narrative with your three-dimensional fears. You can't. They're just little bumps.
Whoa.
In this field.
Okay, you were right. That is a little bit of mind blow on the second part. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lennox. I appreciate it. Appreciate you. And make sure you give Penelope like 27 hugs and kisses from me. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All 27. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.